All right, so I am here with Kelli of Ferrets and Friends Rescue and Sanctuary. Her rescue's mission is to work one day at a time to advocate, educate, and rescue ferrets and friends. I have known Kelli since 2018, and she is one of the hardest working rescuers out there. And I'm so pleased to be talking to you today, Kelli. How are you? I know that rescue work and animal care does not sleep. How are you today, and who do you have with you?
This is Lilith. And it's been a trying year for sure. Um, the rescue doesn't sleep, but neither do I. So
That's
it's
what
been
I
a
mean.
lot.
I know. I know. It is endless. And what's Lilith's story?
Lilith was surrendered with five girls total were surrendered. I feel like it was about 2 years ago in the winter. They were all seniors, and their owner had initially rehomed them to someone who was not ended up not being a good fit. And I drove all the way to New York, 7 hours each way, to pick up as many ferrets as
Yeah.
the woman would surrender. Um, and she has a lot of her siblings going strong. We lost Piper last year, but if they come over, I'll shout out. We still have Freya, Mora, and Nutmeg, which were her sisters or are her sisters.
Oh, that's beautiful that they were able to stay together. That's pretty rare,
When they're
right?
really old, we don't usually adopt them out, so they all came in over 5, which is past middle age for a ferret. Average life expectancy is 4 to 6 years.
Mm.
So when they're older, just as like a courtesy, so they never have to worry about where they're going, or what's going to happen again. We don't usually pass them around, so they were able to stay with us. And Lilith has some insulinoma, which is a very common disease that ferrets get. It's a form of cancer that affects the production of their pancreas and insulin. Oh wait, here's Nutmeg.
Hi, Nutmeg.
And so she's one of our babies who gets meds morning and night to help raise her blood sugar.
Yeah. Oh, they're so adorable. And so, well, let's back up a bit to talk about how you got started. Why did you just decide to open a rescue sanctuary? Why did you choose to focus on ferrets, or did they sort of choose you, as they say? Like, why did ferrets speak to you? Was there an underserved population of animals that were in need of rescue? So, what's a little bit of your rescue story?
I think they kind of chose me. It was a complete whim. I had always had a bunch of different animals growing up. My mom was very supportive of my love of animals and always encouraged me. And I had recently gotten an apartment while I was going to college, and our local animal shelter had put out a plea. As many people, many shelters have the same process. They're really not equipped for small animals. They're mostly dog and cat focused, but they do have to intake other animals when necessary. So they had a bunch of ferrets, and they were like, we can't keep them. So I happened to just walk in to see what it was about, and I adopted a ferret named Panda. I think you may have actually met her. She was my first ferret that I got in 2015, and I instantly fell in love. She was the sweetest ferret, the most perfect animal in existence. And then, shelters aren't really equipped to give you a bunch of information about husbandry or care, and they're overworked and overrun, and they don't have that kind of time. So upon, I went out and I did what I thought was right. Went to the pet stores, bought all the supplies, and I guess a couple weeks, couple months later, I was sitting there and I happened to read one of the food bags, and I was like, this doesn't seem right. And then I went down a Google spiral, and I realized that there's a lot of misinformation out there. And exotic animals, ferrets, fat animals are very easy to purchase, but the care that they need is not always easily accessible. So people are buying them on a whim and then have no idea how to care for them. And then not only that, but let's say they actually want to learn and educate themselves. Oh, this is Mora, one of the sisters. Quick pause. She's a
Hi,
kisser.
more.
Um, but anyway, let's pretend that they care enough that they want to learn. That information isn't just readily accessible or easily out there, and that's what's hard. So upon doing more research, I ended up finding that they're very social animals. They like to live together. So I ended up finding her a brother off of Craigslist. And then that was a rabbit hole because I learned that the animal trade on Craigslist, especially for exotic animals, is
Oh, wow.
absolutely terrible. And it started out just every once in a while, people would send me Craigslist links, or I would scroll Craigslist and I would take, who I could. And then it became small word of mouth. Like I was a ferret lady. So if you had a friend of a friend who needed a ferret, and then the need just became so big that I decided to start the rescue and that I wanted to, make even larger of a difference. I'm not really sure how the sanctuary part came to be. I guess it's that a lot of times I don't often get younger ferrets. Or ferrets had come to me facing such abuse or in such bad condition that I then just said, I don't want them to ever have to worry. Like, it'd be like you're, putting your grandmother out to fend for herself and worrying, about where she's going to be. Like, she deserves to just rest at that point. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to make sure that they just had a safe end of days, however long that would be. I mean, some of them, do pass away in that life expectancy, and some of them live way longer. Panda lived to like 11. Um, but yeah, so that's where the
Yeah.
sanctuary parts. I mean, the younger animals we do obviously want to adopt out. The goal is, households that have smaller amounts of animals, they get more of a home like experience, more time. That's beautiful. Um, but if, that's not the case and we're not getting requests for people who want animals with cancer who are sick and may not have long, then they're welcome to stay here.
I love that they crawl all over you. And obviously, I
You can see
love
what's
that.
behind me with the three boys just being
I
nutcases. It's so funny.
it's beautiful that, of course, like most animals, they trust us and they feel safe with us when we prove ourselves trustworthy and safe around them, and then they can be so close. Look at them, little
Winston,
guy.
Munchkin, and Snaggy are
I
being
lo-
nutcases while I'm trying to pay attention.
yeah, we'll understand if there's a
And
lot
then
of
I got
noise,
and then I got little
knocking
Miss
things.
Lilith cuddled up next to me here.
Oh my God. Adorable. They are absolutely the best. So where do ferrets come from originally? Do they exist in the wild anywhere to this day? Like where are they indigenous to?
So there is a version of ferrets that were in North America called the black-footed ferret. They're not really the same. Well, they're extinct. They actually may have gone endangered. I believe they're extinct.
Mm, mm.
They're working on replicating them at the moment. But anyway, the ferrets that you see now are not modeled after them. A lot of the ferrets that are bred today are more closely related to like European polecats. So, like if you look at the size comparison,
Mm.
so European polecats are much larger. And that's kind of a lot of what you'll see these days, less of the smaller traditional ferrets. But yes, ferrets were found all over, including North America. They're burrowing animals, so they like to hide. That's why we have a lot of blankets in here. We have a lot of hides. They like to be able to, go in the dark, go under things. They like cooler weather.
And what other animals are they related to that are in the same family or the same breed? Minks and
Uh, yeah, otters,
mm,
wolverines. So they're mustelids.
mustelids, and they are omnivores, right? They're not, are they
Carnivores.
pure? They are pure carnivores. So
Yep,
what do they
obligate
tend?
carnivores.
What obligate carnivores like cats? So what do they tend to eat in the wild if they when they're in the wild?
It
Like,
depends regionally, but like for example, in Europe, a lot of the people use them as working animals. So they'll be pest deterrents for like gardens or farms. So they'll hunt things like rabbits, and animals like that to deter them from getting into their pests. Getting into their
yeah,
gardens. It's like pest control.
got it. And so, when they wind up in rescue, like why overall are ferrets so exploited? What are they exploited for? I think you were telling me once about they are used for testing, for lab testing, that kind of thing. I believe I also looked up that are they still bred and killed for their fur? I know certainly minks still are, but are ferrets as well? So just talk a little bit about what happens to ferrets that is so wrong and unfortunate.
So, Marshall's Laboratories, which is the testing facility, they are responsible in North America and probably beyond for a very large amount of animal testing. They don't just do it on ferrets. We're talking beagles, we're talking rats,
Eagles.
we're talking
Hmm.
everything. And they specifically used ferrets for lab uh, development, such as like cystic fibrosis, such as um, Ebola, COVID-19. They have a very similar respiratory system as we do. So they ended up using that to create vaccines and do testing. And then unfortunately, Marshall's Laboratories realized how uh, cute, as I'm looking at how cute you guys are, how cute they are. And so they created Marshall's Farms. And you're most likely going to find most of the ferrets that we have are going to be Marshall's Farms. Um, they did have a company called Path Valley in PA that closed down, but they have a monopoly on the US. You can import ferrets, but most of the time you're going to find Marshall's Farms. They tattoo them and then they desex and descent them, which unfortunately stunts their growth and causes a lot of issues, such as the adrenal disease that I mentioned. They're very prone to cancer. That's kind of how they came to be here. They're big in pet stores, so people go in and they see these cute animals that they don't know much about, and they think, "Wow, this will be great." Unfortunately, pet stores don't include the information about like why exotic animals are more work. This is Freya, the fourth sister that's with us. Um, so unfortunately, they don't provide a lot of information and a lot of rescues we try to work and make sure, okay, you want this animal, but is it a good fit? Well, pet stores, they just sell it to you. So the issue is that people buy them on a whim. They don't realize that they live on average 4 to 6 years. So that means that within a couple of years, you have a young animal that is now middle-aged, if not senior. Senior animals require more medical costs. That's always senior humans require more medical costs. As you age,
Yeah.
you're more likely to have issues. Um, so cost is a huge factor. Um, they're hard to maintain in the sense that they're very curious. They like to get into things that can lead to veterinary issues, or it can just lead to them getting lost in like the house, and that's a high level of care. So a lot of people very quickly realize like, oh, they're not as cute as we thought they were, and then we don't want them, and they kind of just are very quick to get rid of them, and they either resort to Craigslist or they say, I'm going to put them outside. And that's why rescues like us have to exist, because
Yeah.
we don't want them just put outside.
Yeah, I mean, it's so, what you're saying is so important. Education is so important. The education alone might prevent, people discarding them or
Mhm.
surrendering them or breeding them or bringing them into their lives in the first place. Because as you know,
Yeah.
it's a huge commitment to bring an animal who is helpless and innocent and dependent on you into your life and into your world. And ideally, it's a commitment for their life, for the entire extent of that life. And not everybody's a good fit for a ferret, you
And
know.
that's why I
So
work on advocacy and education as well, and hope to grow that more in the future. The goal is not to say, like, oh, ferrets are horrible animals, they're hard animals, or whatever animals. The goal is to say, like, okay, you love these animals, but are they a right fit for your home? Or are they a right fit for your home right now? Like, there's always the future that comes into play that you may be a better fit, but it's kind of like a dog. If you're never able to be home, maybe a dog who has separation anxiety, probably not the best fit. So a shelter would say, okay, let's do this. It's the same kind of thing that I try to do Ferrets are great animals. They have a lot of pros, but just like every animal, there's a lot of cons in the sense of what makes them hard or they're care specific or not as accessible. So, like, for example, cost wise, exotic vets are always going to be more costly because it requires more schooling and it's harder to find. You may have to travel more. So, if you're not able to drive to a certain vicinity, if you're you don't have a couple $100 in, your exotic emergency fund. If you don't have X, Y, and Z, probably not best to pick an exotic animal who requires this kind of regular care. I think people think because they're cute and cuddly and small and they're not typically a dog or a cat that they don't require veterinary care. On the opposite, exotic animals actually require more veterinary care because we took them out of conditions that are very specific and we put them in places that it's very hard to mimic their environments. And then on
Mm.
top of the breeding issues with these large companies that monopolize it and have no good quality standards and all these other issues, it just creates for an animal that has a lot of genetic issues, are prone to a lot of health issues, age very fast, and stuff like that. Guys,
So, come on, kids.
you
Oh,
play too rough with your brothers. You play too
they're
rough.
they get into some good trouble, I'm sure. Absolutely, when they're, but it's so nice to see them out playing with each other. So, well, I guess maybe here this is a good time to ask you, like, what's one fun fact about ferrets that maybe is little known that you want people to know?
They like to steal things. They're very silly. They will definitely, like, I'll be cleaning and I'll have something in my hand like wipes or a spray and you'll turn around and they'll just be dragging it under the cage somewhere. Um, they're little thieves. That's actually what they're known for.
I love it. That's their enrichment, and probably that's their natural behavior would be in the wild again, right? To grab things
Mhm.
and take them
Yeah.
somewhere else where
So
they
when you
can
see
hide
otters
with
with
it.
their little rocks in their paws, ferrets definitely give off that same. You can definitely see why they're related, and they give off a very similar energy, and stuff when they do that. And it's very cute and funny.
So you're talking about pet stores, which is an issue for so many animals. As animal rights activists, we are against pet stores as much as they
Mhm.
people would say they're necessary. They're not, or at least selling live animals not necessary. So talk a little bit more about you, because you have probably lots of experience with pet stores or the animals that come to you once they're sold. Where do people buy ferrets? Talk a little bit more about the Craigslist, kind
I
of
mean, most of
what's
the people are
really
buying
happening.
most of the people are buying from pet stores. They
Yeah.
have, same day adoptions, which is just purchasing same day. And they don't really have background checks or anything. So people kind of just see them. I think, to be fair, to some people's extent, they don't know that ferret rescues exist. That is more of a newer thing.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but a lot of people just buy them on a whim at a pet store. They don't get good direction, and then pet stores don't usually take back their animals, so then they're left to find shelters, rescues, put them on Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, and usually once it gets to that point, it's not in a take your time, find the best home kind of situation.
And what about in pet stores? They're in small tanks, basically, small enclosures. Why is that bad for them in the long term bad?
Well, I mean, the biggest issue is that one, the animals from pet stores coming from Marshalls, they are not receiving their full sets of vaccines and they're not receiving a vet examination. So you're putting multiple small animals near other species, which could lead to zoonotic diseases in tanks. Tanks are not the ideal setup just due to lack of ventilation. All animal urine and feces gives off ammonia, gives off odor, and it's just not like tanks. Everything sinks to the bottom. So ideally, you would have more of an open air space. But I think where it hurts them the most is that a lot of ferrets, baby ferrets, they're carnivores. They're already getting to know how to use their teeth. And when they're not socialized, like when they're just left in a pet store with the light on most hours of the day, and they're not really getting handled and socialized in that way, a lot of them can
Mm.
become biters. So normally other ferrets, moms, or humans would be able to help correct them and say, like, this is too, kind of like puppies, this is too hard of a bite, we're gonna, here's a toy, here's this. um they're just really not getting the development and the socialization along with the veterinary care that they really need to become the best versions of themselves. And the problem is it only hurts them. When pet stores have biters that no one wants, they either try discounting them or they send them back to be euthanized by Marshall's Farms, all because they aren't the ideal of a perfect, animal. But they're that way because you ship them in containers when they're like 2 weeks old away from their mother, and then put them completely out of what a habitat should be, as far as like natural lighting and just store lighting, just leaving them to be exposed, to be stressed out by being tapped on the glass forever. And then you wonder why they act up, and then you punish them for it.
Yeah, so it does shine a different spotlight. I saw someone like your hoodie was moving and I'm like, someone's up there.
Right,
Someone's
it's
up in
behind
your
me.
yeah, as we sort of put pet stores, you know, in a different light, that they're not fun for the animals, and people see these cute animals in these tanks and in these containers, but the isolation and captivity, cat is very cruel. The confinement, and psychologically they can get zoochosis, and just the spinning and the pacing just from not having space, plus, all the reasons that you mentioned. So, but are ferrets popular pets right now? Is the trend going down, up? Do you
I
know?
would say ferrets are very popular pets in the sense of the amount of people purchasing animals. There was a shortage for a while with COVID. They pulled some out of the stores to help with the vaccine, and then they had an outbreak of distemper. So there was a shortage for a while, but ferrets are fully back to being produced and sold. So definitely still in full force. I would like to say that I have had, you know, run into more people over the years that actually do genuinely love ferrets and do provide them a good home and do their due diligence and stuff like that. But I still think a lot of the issue is that there's just not a lot of knowledge, and these people are making decisions without really putting enough thought into it. I think everyone gets excited about animals, and hey, I do too. I know we both do. We love animals more than anything, but I think the best thing you could do for the animals and for your family is to stop and do just a small amount of research, find credible resources, maybe talk to someone who has these animals. With dogs and cats, even if you've never had one before, you have to know someone who's had a dog or a cat, right? You can kind of guess what their kind of care needs, oh, I put a, bowl of food on the ground, things like that. But not many people have ferrets. So you go into it kind of blind. And not only is it hard to find these resources or reliable resources, but then it's kind of niche sometimes to provide these things. So when you get ferrets, you have to ferret proof. If you live in an old house, probably impossible, but you have to prevent places they can crawl under, that little, like under your dishwasher, into the dryer vents. These are things that are deadly but very serious. But are the pet stores telling you this? Are the pet stores giving you handouts and, like, common places to block off or things like that? And I don't know why legally they don't have to disclose correct information. I don't know why legally they don't have to provide really any information. It is a shame, but
Yeah. Yeah,
I
people
guess.
are on their own. They're on their, as a consumer, terrible to think, a consumer of animals, but they're on their own, or they just so as your role to educate more, like, and the nature of rescue, either when people want to surrender, we want them to surrender. If they really want to surrender, surrender.
Yes.
Don't just dump them. If
Mhm.
that's the only other option you think there is, please. Like, so how many, I know you don't have a number of rescues for ferrets are out there in addition to yourself, and if someone wants to surrender, what's the first step? And if they want to adopt, what's that process like? And what's the most, maybe it's what you just said, but what's the most common reason for someone surrendering? Is that they just get in over their head, it wasn't what they expected, or life change, or life things
I'll
in their life
answer the
change?
second question first, just because it's on the top of my mind. I would say I'm gonna go with there's two probably tied reasons. Something is wrong with their ferret, and they either don't care enough to get it fixed or they don't have the money. And then the number two reason is that they got the animal, this is Munchkin. They got the animal for their child, and their child isn't taking care of it. Whether that's a young child or whether that's, an older child, but regardless, their child isn't taking care of it. And so then they surrender it to me. So there are a couple of other rescues that take in ferrets. I don't know of many other that are ferret like fully specific in New Jersey. There's one other that I work with, but then there is a shelter directory for ferrets online. I can send you the link for that, in case anyone watching this has information. It goes by state. Not every state has a large amount, but we all try to scatter ourselves. Um, as for surrendering, we do try to coach people and talk to them and figure out, is this a one-time issue, like a veterinary bill? Like, let's say you got laid off and you just need a little bit of help. Is this something that we can help with one time, or purchase some food and keep them in your care? Granted, you're providing good care. Love to keep animals that are loved in their homes. It, helps free up space for emergencies, and it's, great for them to not have to be tossed around. Um, but if it comes down to it and the people either don't want that, or they don't really care that much, then we take surrenders. Adoptions, we get less adoptable animals. We currently have two younger girls available for adoption. They're 3 years old. They're fixed, descented. That's from Marshalls, and then we got them vaccinated and seen wellness exams. Our adoption process is usually you fill out an application. It's just kind of like a screening form to try to see what you know about ferrets and if ferrets are the right fit. Nothing in that application stops you from moving on to the next process. That it's just a goal to see like what information you have, and then from there we usually like to schedule some phone calls to talk about, like, just because you know nothing about ferrets doesn't mean you shouldn't have one, but try to get more information, like where do you plan on housing the ferrets, are you aware of these kinds of issues that may come up, are you, do you have a vet in mind, if you need help finding a vet. And then once we're kind of sure that ferrets are the right choice for you, I actually do a home visit with them and I help them get settled in and make sure you guys have the cages and the food that they need to start their journey. I know not every rescue has the time or the ability to do that, but I really do try to, because I think it's really important for people to feel like they're able to ask questions and they don't have that oh shoot moment of like, I just got an animal but I don't know what to do. Like, I'm there every step of the way. And, even before I leave, I said, okay, so, what's your plan for X, Y, and Z? And do you have any questions? What's your day-to-day going to look like? How are you feeling about them? Does their energy level bother you? Things like that. I think it's really important. And it's no hate to shelters or rescues that don't do that. I know a lot of them are way overrun and overworked, but I think that also helps limit returns and helps limit people suddenly changing their mind or putting them on Craigslist without you knowing, or things like that. So I really do try to set people up for success. Now, unfortunately, some people do not like that and are very convinced. I would much rather buy from a pet store because this lady is asking me questions and the pet store does not. And all I can do at the end of the day is advocate for why I disagree with that. One, it's supporting a company that I don't agree with. You're taking away the opportunity to place animals who really need homes into homes by just encouraging them to breed more. And they have a huge cost and they're not vaccinated or vetted. So you're probably going to have more issues down the line. But I just try our best and I try to be there. And if people end up needing us in the future, then at least I know that I'll be available.
Absolutely, absolutely. Right. Yeah, trying to prevent is it's we don't want to take the path of least resist of, the shortest path here. We want to set
Mhm.
people up, pet parents up for success because that ultimately helps the animals. And I wanted to
Yeah.
say as an aside, because you mentioned Marshalls, which is like the biggest in North America breeder of and lab. But there's also Ridgeland Farms, and you've probably have heard that just now, as we're recording this, there had been an open rescue rescuing some of the beagles from Ridgeland Farms, which is in Wisconsin. Now there's an even bigger one planned coming up, which will hopefully be successful to get more of the dogs out. There's about 2,000 beagles, only beagles there, and it is basically a factory farm for breeding dogs, and they sell to labs and do their own testing. So, people can kind of look that up. But then, so I want to talk about the dogs that have come to you because you also rescue dogs. But is there any other ferret happy ending story that you can share where maybe a ferret came to you in really bad shape or from a really bad condition, but then turns out, that you're able to, really step in, or any story?
Um, I mean, as sad as rescue work is, I have to say a lot of the stories are happy until at a certain point. Um, is that you, Lilith? Um, so we had a ferret, Casper, who was surrendered probably like a year or so ago, and he was surrendered. The owner had emailed me and said, I'm moving. I need to surrender my ferret. He's old. I'm going to euthanize him tomorrow if you can't take him. And so I said, well, is something wrong with him? I'm a huge advocate for humane euthanasia for proper reasons. I think it can be an amazing blessing to be able to offer animals that are suffering a peace. And so I had explained to him that if something was wrong with him and he thought it was terminal, I think it would be best that family got to say goodbye rather than being put randomly to someone that he didn't know, that I would have to say goodbye. And he said no, nothing's wrong with him. I mean, I think he had a stroke, but he's doing fine. And Casper came. I really thought he wasn't going to make it. His blood sugar has been all over the place. He has insulinoma, and that guy is older than dirt. My vet has a scale, old as dirt, older than dirt itself, and he is older than dirt itself. We don't get many of those. And he's still trooping and trucking along. He was blind, and I was really, really nervous about him adjusting when he first got here. I had to like make a special cage with certain like one level and then expand, expand, expand. And now he gets around pretty great. So he's just chilling, and he'll get to chill for whether that's 5 more days, 5 more years, whatever. Um,
Yeah. Living his best life, as they say. That's beautiful. That's a really, really beautiful story. And you said that ferret life expectancy, I guess
four
when
to
they're
six years on
domesticated,
average.
it's 4 to 6 years. And in the wild, under the best circumstances, would that be longer, or do you
I'm
don't know?
not as sure about the wild, but I do know based off the breeding practices in the UK, um, that their life expectancy is way longer. They have larger ferrets and longer years. So I would assume in the wild, probably longer. From my knowledge, the way we are breeding them, specifically Marshalls, with desexing them, at such a young age, we're talking like 1 or 2 weeks, they don't get the growth hormones. We're creating smaller animals and animals that are, genetically worse off. So I would stand to guess that in the wild it'd be longer. I'm just based off of what the life expectancy is, even for domesticated animals in other countries.
That's what humans do, isn't it? That we just mess with animals. We just
Yep.
invasively think that we have a right to lay our hands on them in the first place and then surgically alter them, alter their DNA. Anyway, that's a whole other terrible thing. But let's talk a little bit about the dogs that you bring in. You have mainly ferrets, but you also do bring in mainly like senior dogs as your focus or
Yep.
medically needy dogs. So tell me about your relationship. I think sometimes you pull them from shelters, or maybe sometimes someone reaches out to you directly. So
So
are they surrendered?
the dogs are almost always pulled from shelters. I've
Like
worked
high
with
kill shelters?
Yeah, so I've worked with Homeward Bound and I've worked with Act and Philly. And I usually take medically frail and otherwise unadoptable dogs. So Blimp pulled from Homeward Bound, and he genetically is inbred. He's an English bulldog. His legs are backwards. I tried to save his eye. We ended up having to take out his eye, his one eye, from neglect. Bacteria just ate a hole in it. He requires eye drops, and due to his breed, gets lots of infections, has lots of allergies. He's definitely afraid of outside. He screams if you bring him outside. I thought with time we could help use positive reinforcement. That has not worked. He's still happy though. He jumps up on the couch and loves to hang out with people, but he is not an outside dog. And then Mia is 12 and she's a little mini, like kind of pocket pity looking creature. She's got goblin ears and she snorts like a pig. She's a little hippo. And she's incontinent. So the problem is that, not that these animals aren't great or anything. It's that people rarely have, and it's kind of for what we do in our society, right, too. Like there's an issue with that humans are living longer, and a lot of times people dump their family members in assisted living facilities, senior living facilities, and then never visit. It's kind of the same things that are happening to animals. When animals get to be an old age, people just suddenly don't want to care about them anymore. They don't care about how many years or how many good memories that they have brought to them. It's more about the fact, well, you have an accident in the house sometimes, or, you sleep more, you're less fun. I don't want you. Or, I have to bring you to the vet once every 6 months, and ugh, that's boring. And it's really sad. So these animals are great and I have nothing but good things to say about them. But unfortunately, people have a lot of conditions into what they would want from an animal. And the animals that I take in conventionally would not be adopted just because, like I said, for the ferrets, no one wants a ferret who may live a year at most, who has cancer, who requires treatment, who maybe doesn't play as much. No one wants a dog who has accidents. And that's a shame. I mean, a part of me understands why. Like sometimes that's not feasible if you're renting in a place you live or whatever. But a lot of time it's just plain, just they don't love the animals, and that's, I guess, sad.
Yeah. And again, sometimes it points back to that we make even the animals about us. We're like living with an animal, we make it about
Mhm.
what's best for us and how
Yeah.
our feelings are changing and forget that this is a independent, living, feeling, emotional being and they're having an experience all of their own. And putting
Hmm.
them first. What do they need? Like what will
Yeah.
we need as we grow older, as we might get sick? We would hope that's when our family would really step up, not leave
Yes.
us, not dump us, not walk away, not ignore us, not turn a blind eye. But that's when we need our people, our support systems, the most. So we want to really stop and shout out senior dogs and dogs with some
Yeah.
issues. Like, folks, come on, help them out. Help these animals.
Yeah.
Everybody wants a puppy, like puppies, puppies, puppies. And they're so cute. And the
And the
videos,
funny part is that, in my opinion, not that I dislike puppies, puppies and seniors are actually very similar. They have accidents because you have to potty train them. They chew a bunch of things because they don't know they shouldn't. You know what I mean? They have no sense of routine. They don't listen. It's kind of the same issue with senior dogs, although for different reasons. So, like incontinence versus not having, a schedule, chewing other things just because maybe they're getting doggy dementia. Same with not listening, like they're going deaf or blind. So it's so funny to me that people have all of this tolerance and energy for puppies, which bring a very similar energy.
a lot of
Um,
work.
I think a lot of times, if I have to boil down to it, all of these things definitely are a factor. I have to say, I think the biggest thing though is selfishness, and that means to me is that these people, at the end of the day, they don't want what comes with death, what comes with aging. They don't want to have to say goodbye. They don't want to have to make those decisions. They don't want to put any cost out. They don't want any of that. They would much rather hand them off to someone else to have to say goodbye, to have to deal with them in those end stages. It's not always about that they don't want to deal with the accidents. I mean, a lot of times it is. I mean, I've had people say, "Can I surrender my ferret for you to euthanize them?" And I was like, I could cover the euthanasia. Do you need help? No, we just don't want to be the ones to say goodbye. You've had your animal for 6 years and all they know is you, and you don't want their final moments to be with you. I respect that it's hard, don't get me wrong. I, more than anyone, probably understand how hard it is to say goodbye, but you don't think you owe it to them? I I think that's
I
what's sad. At the end of the day, people don't want to touch senior animals because they always think about themselves more about like how it's going to impact them, like how sad they are about saying goodbye and stuff like that, instead of thinking about, wow, isn't it great that I just got to, say goodbye and be there for a being that I loved, who gave me unconditional love.
Yeah, it's as we say, euthanasia when it is necessary is the final act of love.
Yeah.
It's an
It
action.
can be beautiful
It's
when you're
not.
using it for the right reasons and you've exhausted
Mm,
all, reasonable efforts to keep them in pain or provide treatment. Sometimes, especially with exotic animals, they're stuck in fight or flight. Their body just keeps going, or sometimes their mind is just so strong, but their body's failing and they want to live, but they're not kept comfortable. And like I said, when it's the right thing to do, euthanasia can be beautiful, because I've seen the alternatives, of if you try sometimes treatments and then things don't work out. But yeah, it's a shame.
and with all of your experience being by the side of these animals who've come into your life, sometimes for short periods, sometimes for longer periods, would you say, certainly they're aware of us and they also see us as, the center of their universe, but when they're going to be euthanized, do you feel like it's actually helpful for them emotionally? They're aware that we're with them, and that helps, or
1,000%. And I've actually had vets comment to me too that, one of the hardest parts that they have to see is when people don't want to be with their owners, when, when owners step out and they're like, well, you just euthanize my pet, I'll be outside the door. So like I said, I've had to say goodbye many a times. And Lil, if you're knock it over the camera, girly. Um, and I mean, I've had many ferrets who have kissed my tears away while I was crying, who have just curled up next to me and relaxed. And even if they don't have a way to express it, as dramatically as such as, licking my tears away, I'm sure they can feel a presence being with you. You know what I mean? Being with them as they drift off. Usually they're sedated first. So don't fall, please. Drifting off into that sleep, they have some sort of love and light
they
that's
do.
familiar to them, whether it's scent, whether, I don't know how. I'm sure every animal is different with like how aware they are, what's going on in the time that's causing them, us to make that decision.
Yeah.
I just said don't fall. But I don't
Yeah,
know what sometimes their awareness is. I'm sure sometimes that
yeah.
changes.
Well, even if
Um
we're not sure, this is why we're saying this to people, err on the side of that they're probably more aware than you think. And it's the same with people too. They say even when people are in a coma, they're aware, and if they come out of it, they can report what was said and different things that they were thinking, at the time and what they were experiencing. So I do want to encourage people. I know everybody's in a different place, strength wise, emotionally wise, to be by the side of their beloveds. That's the time this is where showing up for them and putting our feelings aside, or reframing it into something sacred. But so I want to talk more about grieving and loss and the struggles of being, an advocate, a full-time advocate for animals. But let's talk a bit about sort of running a rescue in general, because I think you will agree that running a rescue is not glamorous. It's hard, stressful. It might look to an outsider like, oh, you get to play with these animals all day. Yeah, yes, and everything else, but it's stressful. And I know I've heard you say it's discouraging sometimes, but it's also on the flip side at the same time hopeful and rewarding and life affirming, and you're
yes.
serving these animals. So what do you want people to know about behind the scenes, behind the curtain of running a sanctuary really is? I'm
I think
rescuing a sanctuary. Yeah.
I think there are a lot of positives that people can probably guess, right? Like, when you get to see an animal who's never experienced love, or when you get some TLC into them and some vet care and you see them bounce back, like, seeing that is, I mean, awe-inspiring. Getting to earn their trust or their love is like a ray of sunshine after a really long winter. And then those are beautiful moments, seeing them learn to love other ferrets, seeing them learn to act like ferrets, seeing adoption, seeing, all of those things are beautiful. I don't think that sometimes people realize that there are other asides because for as far as social media goes, and similar to the senior animals, people want the more positive things, right? They're more likely to respond to the positivity, but I think it's also really important that we talk about um everything else. There's compassion fatigue. Even when I haven't slept and I'm maxed out with emergencies, if people are saying they're gonna throw their ferret out, I have to step up no matter how tired I am, no matter how financially maxed out I am. People get very mad if you don't want, if you say I can't take your animal. I think people have a lot of they feel entitled to a lot of you, whether that's be that you have to take your animal, you have to pay their vet bills, you have to respond in 5 minutes. Like, recently my response times have been longer just because of the back-to-back emergencies and my mental health. I'm one person, and these are non-emergencies that I'm responding to, and because it takes you a day to get back to what are the ferrets' ages for adoption, people freak out and get very angry or mean, or God forbid I wear, my mom got me a new pair of shoes and someone saw it, and I had one person say, well, you can afford, they were Vans, by the way, but that you can afford shoes, but you're asking for money online. Well, I didn't buy them, but I do need shoes. I'm still a human being, and my money should not be, it does, but everything about myself should not have to be thrown into the rescue and entangled for me to be considered valid, right? Like I shouldn't have to live in poverty for you to believe that I care about animals and live a rescue. I shouldn't have to never eat or, go to a concert for me, for you to believe I live in animals. I don't have to take every single animal in the world because then I'm going to be called a hoarder. I just feel like there's a lot of pointed and rude remarks that I don't think people realize how close to home it hits and how hard it is. It just feels sometimes like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. A lot of these people making these comments, they're not offering to foster, they're not offering to volunteer, they're not offering to adopt, they're not offering to do any sort of activism, they're not donating, but they're sitting behind a computer and they're having a lot to say about what I do. And I don't always even post behind the scenes. I don't post that I'm out till 3 or 4 in the morning at an emergency vet having to say goodbye in a very traumatic way. And I have to get back up all over again the next day, technically the same day. And then I have to give everyone their meds. And then I have to work because I also work in order to pay for, everything else. They don't know that I dump 90% of my earnings back into the rescue because we don't fundraise enough, especially this last year. And it's very hard. It weighs on you. Compassion fatigue is horrible. I would love to help all of the animals. Physically, I'm not able. And I think all in all, not to make this too negative, because they're also great supporters. There are also people like you who have been, a big supporter for a long time and people that I know care about me. But I think finding ways to like I don't know, like divvy up everything in the community, right? Like it can't be on one person. It can't be only on shelters. It can't be only on rescues. It can't be only on people, like, without being able to find resources to get help. It can't only be on vets. Like we all have to really work together to solve this problem. It is a very systemic, in-depth problem. It did not start overnight. It has been going on for a long time. We need lots of things to happen. We need more policy and change to prevent it from getting worse in the future. We need to work with pet stores and hopes of either decreasing or eliminating, or at least allowing us to provide adequate education if we're not able, like make these small steps. We need people who are being more considerate and understanding of rescues and making better choices when taking in animals that they fit their homes. You know what I mean? And things like that. I think it's just something where we all need to work together. But most importantly, I think we need to all be a little more kind to each other. You don't know what's going on. You don't know what that rescuer just had to go through. You don't know if an animal just died in their arms. You don't know if they can't pay their bills that month. You don't know, I had my mom was in the hospital, the ICU. You don't know what's happening. But people have a lot of, demands. And I think just remembering that I am a person first, and then I'm a person who loves animals and I run a rescue second. And the person first loves the animals. Don't get me wrong, it doesn't change, but I have had to, over the past few years, really tell myself and figure out that I need to also be able to take care of myself and take time for myself, because the hardest part about rescue is that it doesn't really stop. Like a lot of people, you grieve, and life kind of slows down for a little bit. Some people take off of work. Some people are like, oh, I need some time off, or, just a chill weekend. I grieve and I still have to wake up and I still have to do meds and I still have to change litter boxes and I can't just lay in bed. I still have to work to make the money to support everything. Um, and I still have to answer emails and table events and plan fundraisers, but not too many fundraisers where people think all we do is ask for money. And it's stressful. I feel like there's a lot of criticism. I feel like people really like when you get new surrenders because it's exciting, but they forget about all of the animals that we keep here that require ongoing veterinary care. Um, and I just think this is food for thought. I don't think anyone is
Yeah.
super ill-intended, like that they're super evil with these thoughts. But I think it's just important to recognize those boundaries and why people in rescue have to set them. Because it's we're gonna burn out and we're not gonna be able to continue on if we don't create positive methods and models of continuing. Like having to have a max capacity, whether it's financially or physically, that has to exist. That's what stops us from being hoarders. That's what stops it. You know what I mean? And so we're not saying no to your animal because we don't care. We're saying no because we have to be able to provide good quality care as well.
Right. Right.
And just little things like that. I think a little bit of compassion and understanding goes a long way.
Absolutely. And I'm sure we could even cite examples where rescues or sanctuaries got in over their head, took in too many
Mhm.
animals, so to speak, and then they
Yeah,
couldn't sustain that and they had to fold. And then what? Then the animals all have to be placed,
yeah,
at once in that way. And these are good reminders. Again, we're not throwing shade on people, but take take stock of yourself,
yeah.
in terms of
Hopefully just
checking
shedding a
in.
different perspective though on maybe people who don't, I've met some people who don't realize that a lot of rescue workers don't actually get paid, right? So if you think that they're getting paid and I'm not answering a 9 to 5, I could understand why maybe someone would get frustrated. So, we're just having this conversation in hopes of bringing awareness to people to kind of understand an aspect or a side that maybe they didn't consider. And like I said, definitely not putting blame. I think it's not only the people's fault. I think there are people who get an animal who shouldn't, and they don't care enough to fix it. And then I want them to surrender them because I don't want them to have the animals. And I think there are people who genuinely made a mistake and acknowledge, I don't think I can provide the right kind of care. I did some research, I ran the numbers, like this is not something available for my family. And I also respect that. I think there's a lot of um, work that we all could be doing to try to fix some of these issues, right? I know you do a lot of the activism side that sometimes I don't have the physical time to because, of the rescue. And I think like, hitting it from all these fronts are so important.
Yeah.
You don't have to be an activist to make a difference. You don't have to run a rescue to make a difference. There's plenty of in between, but like, what are we all doing to come together to fix these issues? If everyone
Yeah.
wants to complain about these issues and we're all upset about them, what can we do?
Yeah. And at the very least, don't harm with your words.
Mhm.
Don't tear down,
Yes.
like I think that there's this whole anonymity thing behind the keyboard, behind the screen thing where people get a rush over throwing some words out and then
Yes.
they move on and forget. And that it can wound people who are sensitive, who are trying to do their
Yeah.
best. And let's just have empathy, folks, and be kind to the
And we've lost a
caregivers
lot
and
of great rescuers to suicide in the past few years. And even before rescue work, I've always struggled with my mental health. I have crippling anxiety. I've battled with depression and OCD and PTSD. And while on one end, rescue work is great to help that, like I have all these virtual emotional support animals virtually, it's amazing to have to, even if you don't have mental health issues, to put yourself in the way of seeing so much harm, so much
Mhm.
sadness, so much grief, so much loss, and then although like I said, I do deal with some great people, to see so many people who just don't give a crap about anything and discard animals, it really does mess with your mind. And then, you may have just had the worst day of your life, having showered 6 hours in the emergency vet, wondering if your animal's going to make it,
Mm.
and you happen to log online, don't get to update anyone yet, and you just see a rude comment from someone, and you're just like, this really can bring people down. I mean, and that's not even with rescue though. That's words you say matter. And so I just urge people to be a lot more considerate of the words they're putting out into the universe, especially in this time right now. Like, you know what I mean? You don't realize the impact you could be having on someone. And it's such a terrible way to feel that, you're out there trying to do good and trying to be a kind person. And then, you see all this hate, and you see people who just
Yeah.
despise you.
You can turn those words around if words are powerful, and they can be, and let them be affirming. And maybe your words can make all the difference in the world. And as we talk about mental health in general a little bit, and as it relates specifically to sort of our community of rescuers and advocates and sanctuaries and activists, and there's all the overlap, and veganism, we can't forget the vegan community, because it's all certainly overlapping. And you're
Mhm.
right that mental health issues are more prevalent in our population. We seem to be more squeezed and pressurized, and there seems to be more disconnect and all of that. For reasons we won't even get into, so many, and that suicide is on the rise, I would believe, and maybe even on the rise within the community that we're spotlighting today. But for yourself as an animal advocate, I know you've struggled with your mental health, and you've been very upfront about it, very transparent to some degree. Of course, you hold back some, but how has it been, to in your mind decide whether to be honest about those mental health struggles? And I like to say you're making it okay not to be okay, and you're having it, there's less shame, that and less
I
stigma
feel a lot
around
of
that.
shame, and that's why I never used to post about it in the beginning. I think there's a lot of shame around that, whether you work in rescue or not. But I feel like there's almost some level, and I don't know if it's in my mind, or I don't know when it started, or if it's based off of physical comments. I'm not really sure why, but it's almost this idea that um, if I struggle with depression or I have anxiety, then I'm not equipped to rescue animals, or I'm like, less worthy. I've had other rescues tell me, well, like, oh, if you're that sensitive, then this isn't the field for you. And it's been very discouraging, and I disagree completely. I actually think that people who feel so much are in rescue for that exact reason. I have an amazing sense of compassion and empathy. And I was blessed with that. And I can sit at home and I can cry and I can feel all that, or I can go out into the world and I can use the empathy that I feel, and I could be making a difference. I'm still going to be sad and anxious regardless, but one, I'm using my feelings to make something so beautiful. And I know that my feelings are a lot. I know anxiety is a lot. I know depression is a lot. And it may be too much, but I think that's exactly what makes us perfect for this kind of field. I care enough that I see every living being as worthy of being saved. I sit down there and I take the time when it comes to euthanasia, and I sit with my vet and we talk about, what do we think they would want? What do we think their body is telling us? We go through quality of life markers because I care enough that I'm sitting there, I'm attentive and in tune. And so the reason why I talk about it is because I feel like a lot of other rescues don't. I know for social media, you have to be positive. And I know a lot of us require so much, help and so many donations, that that's a lot of what the content is for them. And I respect why. That's how you get followers, that's how you get donations and spread the word. And they're also doing great work, because spreading the word is also spreading education and information. Um, but I don't want to give off this idea that rescue work is easy. I don't want to give off this idea that, like, it's normal to have to say goodbye to animals back to back to back to back, and then just go on, like, not that they didn't pass, but like life is normal. I don't get a day off, I don't get vacations, I don't get time off. And it's a lot, and I think we need to be creating a healthier space for rescues to talk about that like that. I know a lot of friends in rescue, and I don't really think any of them have ever talked to me about their mental health, even though I suspect a lot of them are going through similar struggles. Um, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure that it's the content that people want to see per se. I'm sure that people are like, oh, this girl's crying again. This girl, this is so sad. But I've always been an open, honest person, and I think the pain is part of the beauty. You know what I mean? The reason why it's so sad for loss is because I loved so much. Um, and I think that
Yeah.
it's a weird twist of beautiful and sad at the same time. And I think that I should share all of that. And I also, like I said, part of my message is just not only about sharing some of the weight, right? Like before sending something mean or before doing X, Y, and Z, can you look at yourself? How can I help? What am I doing to get involved? But also just thinking about like it's so nice even if you can't donate to like say a kind words, just keep an eye on your rescue friends. It's not normal to have to go through so much grief, I don't think, um
Yeah.
on top of everything else in this world.
Yeah, it gets to the extreme of really being traumatic. I don't think our systems are designed. We are resilient in general. We're born
Mhm.
with resilience, but there is some limit. And as you're talking about this, and again, making it okay for people to really talk about their feelings and not feel like they always have to be strong. That they're human, and that's at the root of being humane. It's being human, and that your sensitivity and your empathy is your superpower. As much as we would say it's my weakness, and not if you don't
Yeah.
allow it to hold, you can feel it and not allow it to, hold you back and channel the pain, take the energy of the pain and say, here's my pain. Where do I want to direct that? Or how can I, sort of transform that in some ways. So grief really, you've experienced so much of it, and animals are family, and they are friends, and they are our partners in life, and so it is a valid grief.
Yeah.
It's often
And it's not
disenfranchised.
only sad because you've rehabilitated them, sometimes spent years and nursed them back to health, but sometimes it's sad because it's not the happy ending. Sometimes it's sad because you get an animal and you pour all of this love and energy and you're like, I'm gonna make it so that you never feel pain again and I'm gonna help you get the love that you deserved, and then their body doesn't make it or something like that. And then that's also sad too, coming to terms with the fact that you were too late. And it's hard not to blame yourself. Obviously, it's can't be my fault. I'm not the one putting all of these animals in the situation, but it's just a lot. I think while it's on my mind, I would just like to add too that I think another part of rescue that people don't recognize is how isolating it is. So a lot of people my age are not, they don't have the responsibility of caring for 10, 20, 30 plus animals. They don't, you know, practically work two or three jobs. They like to go out. They like to be able to spend their money and like have fun. And that's not at a place I'm in. I can't really do day trips. I can't really travel for long. And I hate to sometimes even leave the house, especially when, we have some critical condition babies. It's very, very hard to make new friends. So when you feel isolated, that just adds more to the depression and the grief. And then you go online and you see, all these people who are passing judgments behind a keyboard without ever having, known you or known anything about ferrets, just small things. Like, I think you've been with me before when I've been at vendor events and I've had people walk up and just say, ferrets are gross. Why would you ever rescue them? That's your right to think that, right? I would love to have a conversation about why I disagree, but to just someone, I'm trying to make a difference in beings' lives, right? And I'm struggling in a lot of debt, working really hard, wearing myself thin, and to just go up and to just say something so mean, you're just like, could that have been an inside thought? Could that have been phrased differently? You
Right.
know what I mean? Um, and
Yeah.
so I just urge people, if you have a rescue friend, even if you can't donate, if you want to get involved with them, ask if they want to have you over to come sit with the animals. Like I'm sitting here right now. Like, maybe come to them. It could, like, there are so many different ways that you could be a kindness in someone's life, whether we're talking about rescue, activism, veganism, or any other kind of social, mutual aid or anything like that. There are so many ways to get involved with whatever you're passionate about that don't require money, maybe require a little bit of time, or just even kind words go such a long way.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. So, as we're talking about ways to cope, what you're saying is if someone's struggling right now with compassion fatigue, with burnout, with depression, you know, as much as you might not feel like it, do your best not to isolate all the time, to be social with like-minded folks who are supportive and accepting. Remember that you're not alone. Reach out on both ends. As someone who knows people in rescue, reach out to the people in rescue, check in with
Right.
them, and people who are steeped in the
I think we need
24/7.
to be a closer knit and a community, especially of all of our local rescues, of people we can turn to for help. Now, I know, like I said, a lot of us, can't leave our animals or have so much going on, but to be able to have another rescue who just goes, that you can text and say, man, it's been a trying mental day. I've had to say goodbye, 4 times in the past month. Like, I don't know if I, can continue on. And it's just someone to bounce ideas off of and get support from. I think that would be amazing if we had a more supportive, like either a Facebook group or something, a more supportive group chat where we could just get a little bit of positivity and uplifting when we need it. And I also think that creating more of a space where it's okay. So, like we mentioned before, that we've both witnessed a lot of rescues who just took in more animals than they could have. Um, and I would like to think in the beginning it was well intended, right? Like they just wanted to help the animals. But once it got to the point where the animals were suffering and animals were dying and lacking veterinary care and they didn't speak up because of that shame, that's when it became a problem. I would love to have more of a group of connection where we could say, hey, like, I can't take in this animal, or I thought I could, but can we all pull through? Can we help find placement? We're all struggling, but it should be okay to reach out and say, this number is too much for me, or this is too much. Is there anyone else who can help with this cat? Is there anyone else who could help with this rabbit? You know what I mean? Just something.
Yes.
Where we all just pull resources. It's okay to say no. It's actually important to say no. It does leave you with guilt, but I also think it should be allowed to ask for help. I feel like as a rescue, if I ever post that I need help, people suddenly view me as like, oh, well, you're not that capable on your own. But how many people do you know that are social media manager? They are the donation manager. They organize fundraisers. They are the actual animal caretakers. They organize everything with the vets, refill the prescription. They work on their own along with the other extracurricular activities I do. Um, and they do that all on their own 24/7 every day, and then you ask for a little bit of help, and sometimes it's not always well received. I think that needs to be something that changes. I think people should be able to say, I'm having a really rough week, I need volunteers this week, I need help.
Yeah, I think sure. It's a blind spot, and it starts with us. It starts in our communities and something like a buddy system where you have at least one person where you have this mutual agreement that you can check in on each other makes all the difference. And I do want to say
That
here,
actually, I really like that.
yeah, isn't that great? Yeah.
Or two people that
Two or
where
three
we all,
people.
yeah, where we all acknowledge, usually mainly in the rescue community, because I know I have friends in the rescue community, but a lot of times they're too busy where, like, we're not hanging out or stuff. But like if you have one or two people that you make a pact with and you're like, hey, I'm gonna reach out if I need
Exactly.
help, and again, it doesn't have to be visiting in person, we're all busy.
No,
Just
it
a
could be
5 minute
quick.
a
It
five
can
minute
be,
FaceTime call,
yeah.
a 3 minute text to just say, hey, I'm so proud of you. I know what it's like. You're doing such a good job.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to say that I'm part of something that's just getting started with Rev Philly. We're doing what's called a safe haven support circle for vegans and activists. And it's an open group for anyone who wants to go. It's going to be online. And this is what we see that need is there. It's on the heels of an unfortunate loss of someone recently from our community. And it was sparked by like it's time. we need to start actually acting, and folks can reach out to me, for that.
Because activism work is hard too because you're putting yourself on the front lines to see things that most other people want to turn a blind eye to. Especially people who go to slaughterhouses and stuff. And I don't think people realize that we do it for the animals, so it's not a complaint. We're not complaining, but we also have to be real that these things are hard to witness when most of the population is turning away from it.
Correct. It's that exposure, and even little bits of that can really sort of subconsciously get in, and there's an effect,
Yeah.
that stimuli has. It's secondary observation of what's happening. They're the ones who are the victims, or certainly the ones going through it. But that doesn't mean we should pretend that it doesn't affect us on some deep level. And,
Yeah.
we don't
Hmm.
want it to get to a point where we feel like, it's a monster that's eating us up,
Hmm.
from the inside. So maybe as we talk a bit, and we'll wrap up in shortly, but if someone's considering opening a rescue, what might you recommend they do before, consider or think about, or pro and con, or would you recommend that they volunteer, right? Volunteer for a good year or two, maybe at
Yes.
another rescue or sanctuary first.
I would recommend getting involved locally first, figuring out the need, and winding down like your goals, right? You can't just say, I'm going to take in any animal, every animal. I think really thinking long and hard about what your difference wants to be. And again, that's not to say that some are less important, but for example, around here, there's lots and lots and lots of stray cats. Like if you really like cats and you wanted to open to a rescue, do you want to focus on TNR? Like that's a completely different thing than focusing on, senior dogs or exotics. I think making sure, like I said, that you're getting involved, that you have the basics set up, the licensing, the housing, like how are you keeping these animals? Are you going to do foster based? And then obviously it's good to get a kind of list of who you could rely on or call on. I think establishing a great relationship with a vet or another rescue to give you hands-on advice as you go. Some of it is a learning curve. Some of it you do just kind of learn as you go, like about having to say no. Like people can tell you to say no, but that doesn't get easier. Sometimes you do just have to learn on your own. I think wanting to open up a rescue is great, but I also think that before jumping into that, like you said, volunteering, I think there should be a lot of work on supporting the rescues we already have. So we have so many rescues who are very close to shutting down or struggling. Instead of create using all these resources to create a whole nother rescue, can you use that love or passion to support, get involved, even maybe become on a board of one of the ones that already exist, right? Like join forces, make it bigger, make it better. Um, I don't know if a bunch of random people making separate rescues that don't talk together, don't work together, has as big of an effect as us all banding together and saying, we want to cover this from every avenue. We now have more and more people on our side. We have better funding, stuff like that. I think that would be an amazing idea.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. And so those are great. Those are great tips, due diligence and all of that. And sit down and interview someone who runs a rescue, like informally. Buy him a cup of coffee, take him out and say, what's it really like? What do I need to know?
Yeah.
Before you jump in, all the way with both feet. And so, you mentioned that, as a small locally run 501(c)(3), you don't have huge donors,
Mhm.
and yet you have tons of basic needs as well as emergency and ongoing medical needs for the animals in your care. That's reality. So how do you manage that, and tell folks how they can donate, and where the money goes, where the dollars go when they do?
So, unfortunately, it's been a really rough year, and I've had to pour a lot of my own money into it to keep us afloat. This has been a year that has been trying, and I'm not quite sure how much longer we can go on, but I'm just trying to stay strong. Um, right now, our biggest needs are paying down our veterinary bills. We have about $10,000 in veterinary bills that we've been trying to pay off for a while now. And every time we get it down a little bit, there's, another emergency. Um, some people aren't as comfortable with that, so you can donate directly to the vet. We do have sponsorships for animals. All of our animals get yearlies with blood work. You can sponsor things like that or some just smaller tech visits. Um, Biggest needs are litter pads and food on our Amazon wish list. And then we have donation options like Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, Zelle. I think the biggest help is even if you can't donate monetarily, volunteering as long as you want to be a consistent volunteer once or twice a month just to spend time with the animals or help with cleaning would be amazing. Sharing our stuff, helping us get out there. We are currently looking for a social media manager. As sad as it is, growing content is really important to a successful rescue. But when you're kind of a one-woman show, it can be a lot to, sit there all day, work and clean and spend time with them, and then have to film and edit content. And I'm not very good at that. Um, so there's just lots of different ways that you can get involved. For example, if you're a photographer, go to your local shelter and ask if you can take great photos to put on their adoption sites. Like, if you have a skill set, just think about how you can use it for the greater good for the community.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah, there's lots of ways to help. And so how would people reach you? How can they find you, reach you, website, social media, if they want to get involved in any of those ways?
We have a website, ferretsandfriendssanctuary.org. We also have Facebook and Instagram, which is Ferrets and Friends Sanctuary. Um, and we're reachable there. We have an email if anyone has questions about adoptable animals or, getting involved. It's ferretsandfriends622@gmail.com. Um, so we're pretty active on social media in the sense of a presence. I don't always get to post all of the cute content right away, but you can find us in some places.
All right, Kelly. So this has really been wonderful. I've learned a lot as always. And do you have any final words?
No, I appreciate you giving me a platform. We've done this once before, and I just think it's really special to get on there. And, we were kind of all over the place today, but I think it's really important sometimes just to be able to speak freely and find another method of getting information out to people to learn more about what ferrets go through, what they can do to get involved, how they can help just be kinder in this world. All these messages are really important. Um, on a random note, one of the new things that I'm trying for self-care is I would like to start a virtual book club. If anyone is interested, reach out. I think it'll be really great. Reading used to be something I liked to do before I got so busy with rescue. I think it'll help make new friends and hopefully, especially for any of us rescue or activist folks who just have a hard time with self-care and coming down and allowing ourselves anything because we feel like, it's coming at the cost of, well, we could be doing something else for animals. I think it would be a great little, self-care reminder
Yeah.
and a great way to socialize.
Great way to socialize, to learn, to meet, to get an escape. Would it be fiction or nonfiction, or you're open to
I
both?
think I'm open to both. I was thinking about doing more of a self-help, like a the body keeps the score kind of
Ah,
about like trauma
Gabriel,
and healing.
Gabriel. Yeah.
Yeah. That kind of book first, but I am open to suggestions. I like all books.
There's no lacking in books. So I think that's a great idea, Kelly. And I echo everything you've said and hope that people will certainly reach out to you, donate $1 or two, volunteer, inquire about how, you can designate them to get involved. You need social media help, you need exposure, share, your information. Folks, please help Kelly out. So my final words are, in closing, I want to just acknowledge you. And the work is hard, but you show up, girl, anyway. And that is rare. The animals are the beneficiaries of your care, kindness, and tremendous efforts. Folks, please donate to Ferrets and Friends so that Kelly's life-saving work can continue. Saving animals is all of our responsibility. So please do your share. Go vegan, Don't exploit, don't use, don't harm them. Protect them instead. Again, that's what living vegan is, living without harming or exploiting. So thank you, Kelly, very much, and thanks everyone.